Live service games are dying. Can you guys believe that? Who could have ever expected this?
So over a year ago, back in February of 2023, I released a video detailing how live services are dying by the dozen as the genre buckles from unsustainable oversaturation. And fast forward roughly a year and a half, and you want to know what's changed since? Nothing.
Nope.
Absolutely nothing. Companies are still in this gold rush to become the next big live service, to try to become the next Destiny 2. But a lot of those ideas are either uninspired or not competitive enough with what's currently the standard for that stuff to stand out. So guess what? There's been just another round of mass shutdown of live services, or live services that you can tell are going to shut down sooner or later. This discussion kind of cropped up again with the shutdown or the end of support for Exoprimal. This is a game that was released by
This
Capcom,
is something people are worried about happening to New World.
and it was announced on July 5th, 2024, that all planned Exoprimal seasonal content has been finished. Exoprimal, for those who don't know, is this dinosaur shooter game
like
that can be best described as like a mix between Anthem and Dino Crisis, I guess. Except instead of just making Dino Crisis, they made Exoprimal. And it had some neat things going for it, but ultimately it wasn't a compelling enough title for it to be able to stand out. And so the end of support came, and various news outlets sort of began talking about how this should be a lesson to live service developers, or how this is just another casualty in this trend. And what is gaming's worst trend is kind of the opinion that's out there of trying to push live services out there.
Here's what the real problem is with this, is that usually whenever a live service game ends, the experience that a player has interfacing with a game drastically changes. So, for example, whenever you were playing like WoW, if you can't log on to the server, you can't do a lot of things in the game. Like, you just can't play the game. So you need it to be live service. Also, a lot of live service games exist and they monetize through cosmetics. And people buy cosmetics because they can show them off. And if you can't play with other people and there's nobody else around, those cosmetics don't matter as much. That's why people care about buying an expensive car or like anything else. They want to go somewhere that there's other people so they can show it off. Yeah, who are you going to impress? Exactly.
Of having a live service there to recurrently monetize, rather than have a genuinely inspired idea that makes sense for the live service genre where it can shine as a live service. And so I want to detail the next round of games where it's highly likely to already determine that they just don't have a future, and it's going to be a big waste of time and money, and the ones who are going to suffer.
Eventually, you just got to take the old dog back behind the barn and you got to put her down. And that's just the way it is.
Are the developers who just were doing
you
what
gotta
the captain
do
told
it.
them, only to be led astray. Let's start by looking at multiverses. Now, what's interesting about this game is that, I mean, look, you can see right here from the player numbers that it's trending downwards and it's slowly starting to die off. What's interesting about this particular game is that it would be its second death. You may recall that this game launched all the way back in summer of 2022. It peaked to great numbers, but that fell off real hard, and eventually people just stopped playing it. And if you look at the graph of this latest release, it's the same trend of like it peaked pretty high for like a day or two, for a couple days. And now it's the rate.
People don't need another Smash Brothers. They already have Smash Brothers, and they grew up playing. You're not going to compete against Smash Brothers. Just what were you thinking? We need a better one? Apparently not.
At which the player base is diminishing is rather alarming for a live service, one that's free to play at that, and that requires a consistent stream of players to be engaged and in turn spend money on this game for this to be viable. It looks like it's headed down the same path as the first time around when it basically died off unceremoniously. I don't suspect multiverses, unless they make some radical changes and radical additions, will really last all that long, if I'm being honest with you. And what really didn't help matters for
It's not going to. Like, again, it's just that a lot of these new fighting games that are coming out are just mediocre. They're worse versions of existing games. So why are you going to have somebody go and play this game and develop a lot of time and skill in this game when it's not popular?
Versus is that its final release somehow was less feature complete than the beta and had issues that the beta didn't have. And so it just released in a poor state that didn't feel like a huge enough step up from the beta for it to be something that revitalized the player base's belief in multiverse's capability to kind of compete against your Super Smash Brothers or your, Brawlhallas even. Then let's talk about Skull and Bones. Back in February of 2024, it was reported that this game from Ubisoft, the so-called quadruple A game, had less than 1 million players.
Every time I think of this game, I think of the video that we watched about the guy talking about how the water worked. And it's like, bro, ain't nobody give a fuck about the water. No, nobody. What are you doing, man?
Total, including free trial players as of this day, meaning that a lot of people kind of try the game out and decided, yeah, I'm not gonna buy this. And even including those free trial players, the number of players engaging with this game was minuscule enough that I don't suspect.
Well, it's because I watched a couple of guys playing the game, and it looked even shittier than the trailers. It was like a guy that was shooting, it was like shooting a tower over and over with like this super generic health bar over it, and it was going down like... And I'm like, are you kidding me? Is this really happening? It's insane. Like, I was going to play the game, and I was like, this is so horrible. I can't even play this.
This is a game that is going to have long legs unless Ubisoft somehow manages to pull off like a For Honor or a Rainbow Six Siege level comeback, which I guess Ubisoft has done before, but, that is the exception, not the rule.
It certainly is.
Fell, no pun intended, not too long ago when it was
Redfall was so bad that it killed an entire studio.
Announced on May 30th, 2024. That Arcane Austin would be bidding farewell to Redfall with the final update. This was after Xbox decided to shut down Arcane Austin alongside with Tango Gameworks and other studios. The final update
Xbox made the right call. You release a piece of shit like this, I mean, come on. Take her out to the back of the barn. You just gotta do it. Not with Tango? How do you know what their balance sheet is? I bet they were probably losing Xbox money. Do you think Xbox really cut away a profitable partner? Oh.
The offline mode that this game desperately needed for it to be preserved, so kudos there. But that aside, like, the game was just unceremonious all throughout. People didn't really like the announcement.
This is 3433, isn't 343? One of the best things that Microsoft could do for Halo is to just completely take the IP away from them. They've had multiple games to develop Halo. They've failed every single case. They should have the IP taken away from them and be completely fired. Like, it's not even a question. Like, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, let whoever made Doom have them make Halo.
Marketing didn't particularly entice players, and then the final game, the reviews and the feedback surrounding it didn't indicate that this was going to be a successful live service, and Redfall fell pretty hard. And then, of course, the shutdown of Arcane Austin was the kind of final nail in the coffin. Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League is now free to claim for Prime Day when
they're giving it away for free.
That they are already making free offers.
Oh my God!
This is months after its launch. One that's not free to play, mind you. This is a premium priced live service where you do have an initial price tag you have to pay to access it. That's already a bad sign. Combined with the fact that if you look at its player base and look at how many people are engaging with the game right now, you'll find low triple-digit players over the course of 24 hours. This right here is as good as dead, and there have been a couple... 300 people playing the game. Like, yeah, this game is done, man. It's finished. Because, like, this is a AAA game. Like, I mean, there are a lot of games that have 300 people playing it, and they're small in scope games that are not a big deal, and so it's not a big deal to maintain them.
But like dude, it's like if you build like, let's say a restaurant and the restaurant can seat 5 people and you have 4 people show up, that's pretty good, right? But if you build a restaurant that can seat 300 people and you have 10 people show up, even though it's more than the 4, that's still really bad. Still really bad. Not going to be a restaurant for long.
Updates that have rolled out, but that stuff has not been enough to really bolster player numbers because the updates just don't feel all that substantial. They had one chance with the Season 1 and Joker DLC to show that their upcoming content will be thrilling and exciting, but Season 1 and Joker DLC, that did not go down well at all.
It would have never gone well because the game looks like trash and it's bad. That's the reason why people aren't playing it. It just looks like shit.
That the developers are only barely able to keep up with the game's live
Give us another
service
Batman
requirements.
game? Yeah.
They're barely
people,
able to...
I've said this before with Suicide. People don't like Suicide Squad. They like Harley Quinn. And they don't like Harley Quinn. They like Margot Robbie playing Harley Quinn. That's what people like. Suicide Squad's stupid. Who cares about that?
Make content, and when they do, it's a lot
Jesus
of rehash
Christ.
stuff because they just haven't built a solid foundations to make this a viable long-term game. Next up, let's take a look at Foam Stars from Square Enix, which, I mean, it took a lot of inspiration from Splatoon. And
I remember
it's
seeing
the
this.
fact that they were trying to replicate something and, you know, give it a twist of their own, but it ultimately just didn't stand out enough, and then its quality, while it wasn't a bad game by any means, it just wasn't outstanding. It didn't have the personality that Splatoon did.
Yeah.
It just wasn't as refined as Splatoon was. Ultimately, the player base just dipped tremendously throughout the course of its lifespan, to the point where by
95%.
April of 2024, Foam Stars lost nearly 95% of its player base. And while they haven't announced like a shutdown of the game or an end of service or an end of support, I do suspect that that announcement will be coming pretty soon, and that the vast majority of people won't be surprised to hear this. And I think a lot of people will be like, huh, Foam Stars, what even is that? I
didn't even know it came out. And now that it did come out, excuse me, nothing in my life will change. It looked like those games, it was like a lot of PlayStation games that are like knockoffs of Nintendo games feel so soulless and sad to me. It's funny.
A lot of people really have heard of this game, and if they have, they've long forgotten about it and moved on to all the other live services that are out there that are huge time sinks. Companies have the expectation that people just have unlimited time to spend on all of these live services and unlimited money for that matter. But there are only so many people on this planet, and of those people, only so much time can be spent on 1 or 2 games that require you to treat them as full-time jobs.
That's the way I feel right now with Zenless Zone Zero. Like, if Once Human and First Descendant weren't released, I probably would have finished all the content in Zenless Zone Zero. But the reason why I haven't done it is because I just simply have something better to do. And I think that's what's going to happen is like these live service games are just cannibalizing each other. WoW is the same way. Yeah, like if there was no other game to play, I'd play WoW, but there are, and so I don't really want to play them. That's it.
Stay fully sort of updated and to keep up with all of the rewards and all the timed FOMO content that they put out there. Rocket Arena is next. This game did last a couple years at least. It was released on July 14th, 2020, but it was recently announced that the game would shut down. Rocket Arena was sunset on March 21st, 2024.
Sunset is whenever they take it out behind the barn, by the way.
Honestly, this is one game that it was from EA.
This hurts me more than it hurts you.
I haven't looked too much into. I think I remember seeing like a trailer for it back in the day, but it just didn't interest me enough to really check it out. But alas, it's a game that didn't have long enough legs. Moving on, we have this July 11th, 2024 announcement that Tencent is shutting down its free-to-play shooter Synced after just a year. Literally, exactly a year after its release is when this game will be shut down on September.
Bro, so they made that decision probably 2 months after the release, and they just had to sit there and deal with it for 10 more months. Yep.
8th, 2024 at 7 p.m. I don't know much about Synced, I'll be honest. If there was marketing for this game, I must have missed it.
Yeah.
This is one of those, like, who situations. But yeah, again, the market is so oversaturated that there are times where you will just not hear about certain games because there's so many to keep track of, or because the marketing team just failed to really spread word about these titles. As for,
I think the main reason why you don't hear about games is because they're bad. I feel like there are very few circumstances where genuinely good games are out there and nobody knows about them. Like, it happens. Don't get me wrong, it does happen, but it's extremely rare.
some of the more successful live services that have come out, every once in a while you do get a new live service that does manage to kind of market itself just right or hit just right, where a lot of people do check it out. Among them is The First Descendant, though if you look at its critical reception, I mean, already mixed at 53% on Steam from
It's a Nexon free-to-play game that has things that you can buy that make your character better. Like, of course it's fucking mixed. Yeah, duh.
60,000 reviews. That indicates that unless they do something to spruce the game up, it might be a pretty quick descent, akin to what we saw with like Multiverses. And it doesn't help that the scores surrounding The First Ascent are pretty not great, sitting at a 57% from 13 critic reviews, and the user scores at a 4.9 on Metacritic.
I think that people are just rating the game bad. I don't think that the user scores are accurate. I think the game is a 7. I think it's a little bit above mediocre, but it's not like an amazing game either. It's just kind of like a good thing to do. That I don't think 4.9 is fair, but it's not a 10 either. I think it's a 7.
With the mixed score on Steam from tens of thousands of people. But currently, if you look at player numbers, the all-time peak, 264,860 players. That's like a dream launch scenario for a live service. And so far, in what little time this game has been out, the people who play this game are consistently coming back. But I've heard that this game just is kind of bland and lackluster in certain areas, and that it's grindy in ways that are not necessarily fun. Not to mention that when it comes to, I guess, its primary competition, it is kind of trying to be its own version of Warframe to a degree. And Warframe is already so well established, and that is a game whose updates have proven to be so substantial that every time a major new update comes out, it like
in a live service game, monetization should factor into the score. Yeah, but it's going to be different for everybody, right? And like, so for me, I think monetization, the point where I believe monetization is bad is when monetization is randomized. So because there's no randomized monetization in The First Descendant, I don't consider it bad. I don't have a problem with the prices. I have a problem with the pricing. Like the way that, that with the offerings. That's your opinion? Yeah, this is my opinion. That's why I said I think it's a 7. I didn't say it is a 7. Like, for somebody, it's probably a 1, and for somebody else, it's a 10. Of course, of course, it's my opinion. Are you fucking stupid? What do you think? What do you think is happening here?
Transforms the game to compete against that. The First Ascendant, its cadence of high quality new content releases will have to be, competitive with that. And so unless it does that, I can see these numbers drop off fairly quickly over the course of the next few weeks. But this is one of those, like, we'll see. We'll have to wait and see scenarios. And then we have Destiny 2.
You'll know whether The First Descendant is going to be a good game in the next 3 months. Because you're going to, like, they've already made a lot of patches for the game that seem like they're responding to community feedback. So we're going to have to wait and see how that response is going to evolve.
Which is in many ways the mother of live service.
Yeah, there's an patch tomorrow. Yeah, they're adding a lot of new stuff.
The Destiny IP, I think, has been out the longest as far as that particular genre goes, and it's what inspired a lot of businesses to try to essentially replicate its success. And with the final shape having been so well received,
like they're doing really well.
The player numbers peaked at almost the all-time.
I'm very strongly considering trying this game out at some point. Like, I might just wait until they make a new, like, reset for the game, because there's probably so much stuff in the game now, it's overwhelming. But, like, if they made a Destiny 3, I would be there.
Peak that it was at previously in the last month, and in recent months, and recent days, we're seeing players in the tens to hundreds of thousands. So this is a game that's doing well, and who went off with a bang thanks to a great final DLC. Zenless Zone Zero, this is from MiHoYo, and At this point, with the success of Genshin and then Honkai Star Rail, MiHoYo is just too big to fail now. Like any new game they output, I think people will be on board for this particular fan base. So Zenless Zone Zero managed to accrue 50 million downloads worldwide in a very short amount of time. And that does not surprise me one bit. So MiHoYo at this point is established enough as a company and brand that their live services, new ones, will succeed. Helldivers 2 was kind of, I think, a surprise hit.
I think Zenless Zone Zero is doing very well. I don't even know if it's doing very well. Like, I feel like it's just tremendously inferior to the other games that are like it. I do. I think it's just inferior.
When, the numbers peaked to almost over 450,000 players. And on PlayStation 5, we don't know what those numbers look like. This was a massive success, but we are seeing a decline of players. We're seeing players move on. Ultimately,
boring gameplay loop with no progression. Big surprise. It was fun for a while, but then it fell off. Anybody could have predicted this.
While Helldivers 2 can be fun for some time, its cadence of releases, of content updates are too small, and they need like an expansion-sized update, I think, to really rekindle the fire of this player base. There's only so much you can do in terms of variety of activities in this game before people realize they're kind of starting.
I think also the game had a lot of cultural relevance, and you need that's on cooldown right now. Like, they can't release another update and have people like go immediately back to being as excited about it as they were. Now, in a year or so, I think that could happen, but it will take some time.
To do the same thing over and over again, and there's just not enough rewards and things to look forward to grind for. And then one last game I want to look at is X Defiant from Ubisoft, which is essentially their take on a Call of Duty-like experience. And this is a game that has gone on to do pretty well for itself, unlike, say, Skull and Bones. It's like the complete opposite.
Yeah.
X Defiant has been sort of breaking milestones every so often, every few weeks. And most recently, it was stated by Yves Guillemot that X Defiant has attracted 11 million players. How many of those are sort of continuously coming back to play X Defiant in terms of concurrent player numbers? What kind of numbers we're seeing there, and how many people engage with this game at the same time. We don't know those stats, but 11 million players checking a game out is substantial, and I'll be curious to see whether these results...
I just feel like there's like a cap on the amount of successful live service games that can exist. Like, there's just simply not a big... Like, you think about a forest. There are only so many huge trees that can exist in a forest. You can't just keep putting huge trees in the forest over and over and over. Eventually, you're going to reach a cap. And I think that's what's happened, is that cap has been reached, and now people are just trying to churn the people that are inside of that to play their game instead. We've been capped. Yeah, I know I'm capped out on games. I am. I always have something to play.
Will continue, or whether this will flatline and fall off. But when it comes to like Ubisoft branded shooters, Rainbow Six Siege went to do pretty well. X Defiant has a strong start, and if Ubisoft does what they did with the likes of Rainbow Six Siege and For Honor, it could very well thrive. So, not to say that it's completely unviable to enter the live service market, but you either have to chase a trend so well and have to market a game so well that it attracts enough attention, and then the content itself, the quality is good enough that it retains that attention and it spreads word of mouth, or you have to deliver something really inspired, something that feels kind of fresh and something that everyone will want to talk about and play with other friends with. I think Helldivers 2, that initial wave of hype. Well,
you can't replicate that because the novelty of the game wore off. Everybody already knows what Helldivers is now. So there's nothing like new that you can do. A lot of these games release updates at different dates so they can thrive alongside each other. No, that's not true, because like I think that a lot of people want to have a game like WoW. They want to have that game that they come home from work and they play that game and they log on and they always do that one thing. I think that's what a lot of people are looking for, and I don't think people want to like shift between a bunch of different games over and over and over. I don't think so. Yeah, a forever game. I think a lot of people are looking for like a forever game. And that's why like there's a focus on live service, is that games want to be that forever game. That's why, for example, Fortnite is so successful.
That did sustain itself for some time. You know, a lot of people just felt like Helldivers 2
OSRS.
really felt like just
great
something kind of different. Like, yes, it's a shooter, but the whole Starship Troopers vibe combined with all of the shenanigans that can ensue during a play session, and just the identity that it had that was very unique to itself and very self-aware, and just the kind of fun chaos that could plague any session for better and for worse. All of that made Helldivers 2 just feel like the game that was talked about during the time that sort of peaked in terms of its hype and reception. Again, that's fallen off since, because I do think the developers didn't expect the level of success that it attained, so they weren't prepared for the kind of content cadence that this kind of success would require. So I think they're now just kind of building the foundation for that. But that is an example of a game that, you know, it was like a bit of an underdog, but people found it. They talked
I think if the gameplay, like, you've got to keep in mind, a lot of these games that fall off are inferior versions of existing games. And this is something a lot of people need to realize. These games, it's not like these games are some kind of like great, amazing thing that just didn't get discovered. A lot of them have mediocre gameplay, maybe slightly above average graphics and annoying systems. Like, this is just not very good. They're not that great of games. They're not worth investing time every single day into playing.
Word of mouth spread, and it wasn't just your typical like thing copying something else. The thing that was just kind of going for a generic version of something that already exists that's just better than the new product that they're trying to make, which is the fear surrounding Concord, that while this is not a bad game based on impressions surrounding its beta,
it's a bad game, and it would be, if it was a good game, more people would have played it. If people aren't playing the game, there's a reason for it. Having to pay for beta access, no thanks. Nobody complained about that with Baldur's Gate 3 whenever they had early access. There are a lot of games. Nobody complained about that with Hogwarts Legacy to play it early. Or Diablo. No. This is what they did. Oh, you're right, they did do it. But that did not affect the player count. The player count still went fucking crazy because people would play the game or see the game, and they would buy just to play the beta. All huge IPs, though, I don't think that matters. I don't think a big IP is going to make a big difference. If the game is good, people will log on and they will play it regardless. Look at Helldivers 2.
A lot of people do feel like maybe this is a genre of live service that's a little too late. The Washington Post said,
and also you're going to see a lot of people. You're going to see a lot of people talking around why Concord isn't popular. One of the big reasons why Concord isn't popular is because the game looks like it was created from a focus group of DEI consultancy companies. That's also another reason. They literally have like the characters' pronouns in the top corner. It's fucking weird. So all of these companies and these different newspapers are going to be talking about this. Be like, oh, I don't know why people don't want to play it. Oh, who knows? It could be anything. That's the reason why. That's not the reason, but it's a very big reason. Because you see that, you look at the character design, and people are just like, yeah, I'm not interested in this.
Concord is Sony's expertly crafted big bet. It's just a few years late, and the reception surrounding this game has generally been mixed. Nobody's saying it's abysmal or anything, but nobody's saying that it's a standout either. And if something is not a standout from a live service genre perspective, and it doesn't capture an audience immediately from day one and then keep that audience and have that audience grow, then it's doomed to fail. It's doomed to shut down. It's doomed to peter out unceremoniously. And yet, despite all of this, we're seeing companies like PlayStation going kind of crazy. At one point, they were working on 12 live service games that they wanted to ship over the years. Eventually, PlayStation, realizing that this level of live service saturation from a single company is practically suicidal, eventually decided to cut that number in half. At least in terms of...
it's too fucking many, man.
of what's releasing within a certain time frame. Like those other 6 are still being planned for release down the line, but they're kind of slowing down their roll and focusing more on a fewer quantity of games instead of trying to shotgun their way through 12 freaking live services, which is just an insane amount of live services from any one company, even from different companies. 12 live services over the span of a couple of years is still a lot. But Sony by itself trying to release 12 live services, freaking actually nuts.
Yeah, I think it's just a lot of people competing for a market that they think is very big, but it's actually not as big as they think it is. And like, I think that, for example, games will cannibalize each other that aren't related to each other at all, just simply because a new game comes out with new content.
A way that's not inspired, in a way that just feels really, really dumb. Now, we did see on December of 2023 that they did shut down The Last of Us Online. The quality just wasn't there, and Naughty Dog just decided that they're better off being focused on what they do best, which is single-player, campaign-driven, story-heavy experiences. Because, I mean, have we not learned the lesson at this point of what happens when you take a company, a studio that is specialized, that are really good at making single-player campaign experiences? When you take your BioWares, when you take your Crystal Dynamics, when you take your Arcane Austins and throw them into the live service looter genre and expect them to make something that's as competitive and that can match the stuff that comes from companies who've had live service experience for many, many years and have been able to update that.
There's no reason why people should have been clipping through the foreign in Redfall. Like, it doesn't matter what your experience is before then. That was unacceptable and it was pathetic. Like, what are we even talking about? Like, yeah, sure, obviously the studio isn't specialized in that, but so many parts of the game just didn't even work.
Live service for many years and make them much more full and
Let's be real.
substantial. Like that's a doomed kind of project. That's a doomed kind of endeavor when you're dealing with studios that just aren't used to developing in that kind of environment. And so I think it was smart for Naughty Dog to decide to back off on this huge Last of Us Online live service experience.
I think it is too.
I wonder if Sony will be smart enough to not output 6 to 12 live services throughout the course of upcoming years. You know, by fiscal year ending in March 2026. So within the span of 2 years, they initially had the plan to release 12 live services. Even half that, even 6 live services in the span of 2 years is an insane number. And, I mean, it feels like they're just throwing darts at the board and hoping that one of them will hit a bullseye in the dark. But I don't know if that kind of approach will yield results. I don't know if something like Concord will take off. I think that will be maybe the litmus test of whether this is something that will work for Sony. And if Concord doesn't end up doing well, I think Sony may back off further on those plans, realizing that this kind of oversaturation and this kind of rushing towards live services in vast quantities, instead of taking the time to consider what one big major endeavor they can pursue that makes sense for a live service and that is genuinely inspired, they can invest in. This just feels like, again, like a gold rush race.
They're just trying to do whatever's popular. That's all there is to it. They're not even doing it. They're not in it for the love of the game. They're just trying to capitalize on it and get their flag there first so they can be the next Fortnite. I feel like what happened is as soon as Fortnite popped off, every other fucking game wanted to be like Fortnite. So they keep trying to do the exact same thing. That's what's going
considered and something that is coming from an artistic and creative perspective. But this is kind of the current state of live services right now, ladies and gentlemen. A handful still can slip through and take off and whatever. But even then, the question of can that maintain itself and, can that not suffer the massive declines that a lot of these tend to suffer? That remains to be seen. And the race towards infusing the market with more live services is far from over. And it's one that's going to result in a lot of failed projects for just no good reason, from a lack of foresight, from just sheer short-sightedness. The market getting more and more saturated with these kinds of games. It's going to be harder and harder for any one live service to stand out and succeed. But I'll be curious to see where some of these live services end up,
in the garbage. That's what they're going to be. I think that this whole idea of these, like, oh, this game was good, but it never really caught on. My opinion is that it didn't catch on because it wasn't good. You might think it's good, but the complaints that people had, I think they were pretty fucking valid.
A year or two or a couple of years from now.
So I didn't talk about Tower Fantasy.
Though, let me know in the comments below
They're
what your
making a new
thoughts
game.
and opinions are on the recent cadence of release of live services, and whether you think that this is viable and whether there's certain live services that are doing it right.
Yeah.
And what you think about just all the shutdowns versus some of the ones that do manage to take off and succeed here and there. So let me know in the comments below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.
I think he's right pretty much about all this stuff. I do. I think, honestly, what's happened is that there have been so many games into space right now that are live service. So, like, here's an example. There's the video. Give it a like. I really agree with pretty much all of this. There, a lot of times, just like, I feel like games don't really need to be live service, but they're made live service on purpose. And I think that's really what the problem is. So if you look at, for example, let's look at where are the most popular games. Live service, kind of a live service, not just, it's just the greatest game ever made. Live service, live service, live service. I don't know about this game. Live service, live service, live service, live service. I think they do updates for this, but I'm not really sure. Live service, live service. All of these games basically are live service. Isn't that interesting? That's why these people are going after it. It's because if you can capitalize on these numbers, you can make a ridiculous amount of money. That's the reason why they're doing it. They want to be one of these games, but what they do is they just try to make their own version of it. Like Once Human, for example, like this game it's quite popular. People do seem to like this. This is actually pretty good. Now, you look at other games, it's not as much, right? Like you see, let me see, like you scroll down, like let's look all the way down to like right here. Where's some more live service games? Many of these games down here are all games that are probably, the ones that are not, single player. I'm not talking about that. These are all games that are under threat of shutdown. Check Once Human Steam numbers. Yeah, sure. I'll look at that right now. Once Human. Let's see here. Game charts. Oh my God. That is fucking incredible. That's amazing. What the fuck? Wow. Show Concord? Okay, let's show Concord. Take it out to the back of the barn, bro. We gotta put her down. You know what really makes me happy about this? Is that this game is so shitty that they're gonna have to pay people to play it. And I might be one of them. So, the thing is, for me, you guys got to keep in mind that I have the mindset of it doesn't matter what happens. I figure out the way to kind of like, get in there and make money or, take advantage of it one way or another, right? So it's like if the game does really well, then I farm about how the game does really well. If the game is really bad, then I farm about the game being really bad. If the game is like mediocre, then I take a sponsor for the game and then I make a video 2 weeks later about how the game's dead. Like there's literally no way that I can lose. And I've engineered it to like, this is like whenever I say that we consume games, like we chew them up and we shit them out. And it doesn't matter what it is, it happens all the same.